أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We will, inshallah, begin now our seminar on preparing the body for the funeral and for burial according to the teachings of Shia Islam, according to the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. This is something that we should always be prepared for. Every one of us, we know that we are going to die. And we know that all of the members of our family, our loved ones, our friends, our community members, all of them are also going to make this journey from the present life to the eternal life. Allah says in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Every soul shall taste of death. So that is not something that we should fear. That is something that we should be prepared for. And part of the preparation for death is for us to be aware of what are the preparations that are needed for the dead body of a Muslim in order for it to be ready for its final resting place in this world. And these rituals that we have in Islam, they have a multiple aspect. One aspect is to prepare the body with the dignity and respect due to it for its final worldly resting place in the grave. One aspect is to prepare the soul of the deceased person for entry into eternal life. Because remember, death only applies to the body. The soul does not die, it tastes death. And in fact, it is born and enters into its eternal life. And the third aspect is for these acts of worship and these rituals to serve as a reminder and as a preparation for the living, for those of us who are the loved ones of the deceased Muslim, so that we can remember death, we can be prepared for death ourselves as well. So there are multiple wisdoms in these teachings. And this is something that is an obligation for every Muslim. However, in the current situation, we should prepare for any emergency. We pray to Allah that the worst case predictions regarding the extent of loss of life that might take place do not come to pass, and that there are treatments that are proven effective, a vaccine is developed, the efforts at stay at home and quarantining are effective in reducing the spread of sickness and death, but we should be ready that our families and our communities may be in need for people to volunteer and help in these preparations for the body to be ready for burial. I would like to begin by thanking in particular Sheikh Abdul Jalil for joining us, and we will also be benefiting from his knowledge and his scholarship. Before we speak about some of the specific issues and we talk about the special issues that might be relevant to the current health concerns related to COVID-19, the coronavirus. Let us begin by seeking Allah's blessings from some verses of the Quran. I will recite the verses of Surah At-Takathur. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. To begin our preparation, let me just say a few words about the importance of volunteering to help the grieving family when a loved member of their family may leave this world for the eternal life. It is a collective obligation, a wajib kifa'i on the Muslims to come to the assistance of the family of someone who has died and to make sure that every Muslim has a proper, valid, and dignified funeral and burial. And in addition to being an obligation for the collective, for the entire community, it is an act of profound blessing and reward. According to some ahadith, if a person volunteers to wash the dead body of a believer, that act is a source for the forgiveness of all sins that a person may have committed in an entire year, aside from the kaba'ir, the major sins like murder or something like that. And in another hadith from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam, it is said that if a person performs that washing of the dead body and the funeral preparations of a deceased Muslim, وَأَدَّى الْأَمَانَةِ, and they fulfill the trust, then Allah will forgive their sins. And it was asked of the Imam, what does it require for a person to fulfill the trust? And the Imam said, to fulfill the trust means that after you have done the washing of the body, the shrouding of the body, sometimes the human body in that state is not in its perfect condition. There might be something that is embarrassing that a person will see if a person doesn't share that information with anyone, so as not to bring embarrassment or dishonor to the deceased. That is the amana, the trust. And if you fulfill that trust, you preserve the honor and the reputation of that deceased Muslim, then according to the hadith of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam, that is a source for the forgiveness of a person's sins. So it is an act of great blessing and reward. And it would be very beautiful if every member of our community, in particular those who are younger and healthier, learn about these basic rules and volunteer, so that if there is a need, we don't overburden those volunteers who already are carrying out this very important task and this great act of worship. And in many centers, a number of the volunteers who regularly perform this service for their fellow believers are older and may not be in the best of health. And so in this case in particular, it is important for the younger and the healthier members of our community to step forward and offer to volunteer. And the elder and the more experienced members of the community, they can provide guidance, share their experience, but that will be for the greater benefit of all members of our community. And it will be a reminder for us that we too are going to be traveling on that same path and embarking on that journey to the hereafter. The stages of preparation for the body are several. First, there is what is known as ihtidar, when a person is on the deathbed just before they die and when a person dies. Then there is the washing of the body, the ghusl, 3 wajib washings, and before you start, the cleansing of the body. Then there is the placing of camphor on certain parts of the body, and then the shrouding of the body. After that, there is the prayer, and then the burial of the deceased. So we will, inshallah, benefit from Sheikh Abdul Jalil, may Allah grant him increased tawfiq, who will describe for us in brief the normal process of washing the body and shrouding the body, meaning in cases where there is a normal death and there isn't a fear of the spread of COVID-19, the normal procedure for washing and shrouding the body. And then after that, we will talk about some of the special considerations that are needed in this time period, especially if the deceased is known or suspected of perhaps having been infected with the coronavirus. So let us begin by reciting a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And we will now listen to Sheikh Abdul Jalil, inshallah. And because of the effort to maintain social distancing to the extent possible, or spatial distancing to the extent possible, Sheikh Abdul Jalil is going to be joining us virtually. So if you just give us a minute so that we can make sure that the connection is ready. Sheikh, can you hear my voice?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, very good. So Sheikh, inshallah, if you can explain for us the procedure for the ghusl and the kafan of the deceased body. Jazakumullah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيبي وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Hi dear brothers and sisters, Samaat al-Sayyid, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Before we proceed, I would like to make this important reminder for all of us regarding this important workshop. This workshop is like a few of the knowledge that are out there. That learning them is important, but learning them is not enough until you put it into practice. There are few of these ahkam in Islam that you can learn as much as you want, but until you get to the field, you will not properly understand what all of this is all about. One of them is like about Hajj. You can learn as much as you want about Hajj. Learning it is one thing, and when you get to the field of Hajj and those rituals, is completely different. The same thing applies to the Ghusl al-Mayyit too. So it is important as we learn theoretically today to find a time to volunteer with those who have done it or those who are doing it so we can see it and do it a couple of times so then it can register with us about these great tasks in Islam. Now, that is the first point. Number two, I would like to make it easier for our audience, and I want to categorize about this ghusl that we're talking about and kafan. Number one, the first category that I want to talk about is the rule of ghusl, or washing the dead body. Washing the dead body is wajib kifai. What does it mean, wajib kifai? Wajib kifai is wajib upon all. However, when some take the responsibility, then it's no longer wajib or mandatory or obligatory upon those who didn't do it. Which means the moment one or two or three do the responsibility that wajib, then the rest are off the hook. That is the rule of salat or regarding ghusl al-mayyit. That's the first category. Now, within this part of this first category, there are other important things to know, that who are the people we have to give ghusl? What kind of person am I required as a Muslim to wash? Because number one, I'm not obligated to wash the body of kafir. No, I'm not. Or a Jew, for example, or an atheist. No. But we are obligated to wash a body of Muslim. Any Muslim who dies, whether I know them or I don't, it is wajib to give the ghusl to that body. That is one. Now, that body, whether it's an infant, is still wajib. And what do I mean by infant? Infant means any child that is at least 4 months old and up. From 4 months old and up, it is wajib to give ghusl to that child. As another thing regarding this ahkam. Another one is wajib to give the ghusl to a person who is Muslim, even if they happen to be mentally handicapped. Like somebody who is mental, as long as he is born Muslim, it is wajib to give them ghusl. Even a child that is born out of wedlock, still is wajib to give ghusl. Now, so any person who is defined as a Muslim, it is wajib to give them ghusl. Now that is category number one. Category number two, the people who can give ghusl. Who can give ghusl? Can anybody come and give ghusl? The answer is no. The first thing that we have to understand is, if the deceased leaves a will behind, then the will takes the preference. Meaning what? If the deceased says, I want brother A, brother B, C, or sister A, sister B to give ghusl, then they take the preference. That is number one. So, before I come to get myself involved to give a ghusl, I have to ask, did the marhum or marhuma left a will as to who to give ghusl or not? And this is one of our rights as a Muslim, to make that decision before we die. That is why you see, as Zahra Salamullahi alayha, she made that. She told, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, إِذَا مِتُّ فَغَسِّلْنِي. Oh my husband, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, when I die, I want you to wash me. Right? So that is the first thing we have to find out. That's one. Number two, if there is no will, then still we cannot go do the ghusl. The ghusl falls on the nearest family. Meaning what? If a father dies, then the children, they have the right of ghusl, above anybody else. Now, if I want to give the ghusl, I have to get their permission. If they don't permit me, yes, even though it's wajib, right? I cannot just go and do the ghusl because I want to. They have to permit, and if they permit, then you are allowed to give them. Right? So that is number one that we have to understand, that they have to make sure that the will is in place, and if there is no will in place, then it goes to the family of the deceased, which are called awliya ul-mayyit. Right? They make the decision, but it's preferable for them to do the ghusl before any outsider. But if they don't want to and they chose someone, yes, then that's when we come in, if we are not the family member. Now, that's number two. Number three, if the marhum is a Shia Isna Ashari, then the person giving ghusl also should be a Shia Ithna Ashar. This is very important. If they are Shia, but for example Ismaili or Zaydi or other sect, it's not enough. It should be Shia Ithna Ashar, the same belief as the marhum. That is also important to know. Another one also, the person performing ghusl have to be aqil, which means they are matured, they're sane, they know what they're doing before they can perform that ghusl. That is another thing. Another rule also is, if the marhum is a male, then the person who is given ghusl should be the same gender. Which means, if a man dies, a woman who is stranger cannot give ghusl to the deceased. And the same also, if the deceased is a woman, a strange man cannot give the ghusl. Now, there is an exception to this rule, which is a spouse. Husband and wife can give ghusl to each other. Which means, if a husband dies, a wife, if she can give ghusl to her husband. If the husband is not, if the wife is the one who dies, the husband can give ghusl. This is the exception. But other than that, when a person dies, the gender, the same gender, man, should be giving the ghusl to the mayyit who's a man. If a woman dies, then a woman should be the one giving the ghusl. Now, that is number two. Number three, and that is the rules of ghusl. When we decide to do ghusl, when we are given permission to do ghusl, or if we are the ones who are the relative, we are to do the ghusl, there are things we need to know. Number one, al-ghusl must be done with the niyyah qurbatan ila Allah ta'ala. It must be qurbatan ila Allah ta'ala. It shouldn't be for any other reason. Some maraja even said, if I'm going to give a ghusl and charge money for it, then that ghusl is batil. Cannot do that. It has to be only qurbatan ila Allah ta'ala. Right? Now, if that is done, we have a niyyah, qurbatan ila Allah ta'ala, then the next thing we have to do as a people, we have to be prepared to make sure that there are many things put aside. Number one, we have to make sure that there is something called sidr. A sidr is a leaf that is recommended from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, that it should be put into the water at the time of ghusl. And it's wajib. It's called ma'us sidr. And what do? Ma'us sidr, you just put a little of this leaf in that water. It shouldn't be too much where it changes the color. No. It should be put just a tiny bit where it keeps the smell and you can see there is a sidr in it. That should be enough. That is the first water that should be ready. That's one. The second water is called ma'ul kafur. It's camphor that you have to put in the water too. That is water number two. And water number three is called ma'un khalis or ma'un mutlaq, which is the absolute water or pure water. These are the three waters that we need to make sure that it's available before the ghusl. That's one. Now, this ghusl, as we said, it also divided into two. There is wajib, there is mustahabbat. There are things that are must, and there are things that are mustahabbat. Right? Now, one of the mustahabbat is, before we start the ghusl, it is mustahab to wash your hands. Hands from the wrist till this arm here. One have to make sure that you wash it properly. Right? This is if before you start the ghusl. Good. Now, as I finish with myself, I'm walking towards the dead body. The dead body should be placed in a way that is facing towards the Qibla. What does it mean? It should be laid in a way that if the person, the deceased, is to be sitting down, he or she will be facing Qibla. That is the first rule, that when we walk in there, we wash our hands, the marhum is there. The first thing is, we have to make sure that it's facing towards the Qibla. And this rule should be done even before the death. Inshallah, another time we might talk about it, which is called halat al-ihtibar. When the person is at the time of death, when we see the signs, what are the things we should do? The rules are also there that inshallah at the right time, we will discuss that into detail. But as we walk in, we have to put the body facing towards the Qibla. Wash our hands. Then the third thing is, everything must be removed on the body of the marhum or marhum, including things like rings, right? It has to be taken, everything has to be taken. The clothes, except we have to have a piece of cloth covering the private part. That is wajib. You cannot take everything out and leave the marhum without a cloth. No, you have to have a piece of cloth, and mostly when you go to buy the kafan, or when you do the kafan, you should have a piece of it like that. And sometimes you can even make it 2 or 3 of them, that after the first ghusl, you take that one, you put the next one. And then you take the first one, you put the next one, until the last wash is done. Now, so the private part must be covered at the time of ghusl. After we take everything out of the body, then the next thing is, we have to wash the body. Wash the body. Wash the body like you give the person, a shower, the soap, clean everything. And the wisdom behind this is to take any kind of najasa out. Because you know, or some of you might know, when somebody dies, not all the time, but sometimes a person dies and they come in the form of najasa. Whether it's blood or urine or number 2, sometimes it happens. So, to get all of this najasa out, first it's recommended to give the body wash. Clear all these najasa out, where to make the body ready for the ghusl. Right? Now, after we do that, then we make a niyyah. And the scholars are very particular in this. Right? Before we start, the person who is giving the ghusl should be on the right side of the mayyit. Which means if the mayyit is laid down, which one is this right? The one washing should be at the right side. And the ghusl also is recommended to have more than one person. The least, if the person is not heavy and can be moved around, the least it should be at least 2 people. One is doing the wash, one is pouring the water, or one is helping to move one side or the other. Now, so the first thing is, after we remove everything, we wash our hands, we make a niyyah. What is the niyyah? I am washing this marhum with the water of sidr, wajib qurbatan ila Allah. And it can be done in any language, it doesn't have to be, which means I'm washing this deceased with this water of sidr, wajib qurbatan ila Allah. Now, after that, then you pour the water, you start. The body, automatically, you should divide it into 3 as you wash it, right? The first wash will be the head and the neck included. You wash it, make sure the water gets into the hair. Depending if the person has a lot of hair, we should put the water to the point where we get our hands into the hair to make sure that it reaches every part of the hair. And then come the face and the neck. That's part number one. When we wash that part, then we come part number two, which we start from the right side of the shoulder here, right? Then as I wash, person will put the water, al-Asr. He pour the water on this side, and it got washed all the way along with the right leg, all the way down, right? And then that is where you need another person to move the body a little bit, where the back of the mayyit also is washed proper. So first, you wash from the shoulder all the way down, right? Then after you finish washing it properly with the al-Asr, you come to the other third party, also third part, where you wash from the up of the shoulder all the way down. So that is how you wash the body. The head and the neck one first, and then the right side down, and then the left side also. So that becomes the third wash, right? The third part of the wash. Now, after you finish with the first wash, which is the al-Asr, then you come to the same wash with the kafur. Put the camphor in the water, and then you wash the head along with the neck, and then you wash the right side, and then you wash the left side. And you have to do it in order, and it's called tertibi, right? The head and the neck first, which means you cannot go to the left before the right, or the right or head, or you go right before the head. It has to be in the order, sequence, right? So then after that, when you wash the second water, which is the kafur, then you come with the pure water. And here is very important thing. The water that you wash, it shouldn't be too cold or too hot. Right? As you put the water, you have to make sure that it's not too hot and it's not too cold. It should be somewhere like a little warm, where it's not too hot that it can burn, and it's not too cold. Somewhere in the middle, where it's when you touch or you feel it, you feel it's very comfortable, right? And as you wash, you have to be extra gentle. And it's recommended while we wash the body, we do dua for the marhum. That is the first part of the ghusl. Now, after you finish the ghusl, you have to dry the body before you put the kafan, right? And you can dry the body with the towel and make sure that all the body is dried out. Then you go to the next part, which is the called al-kafan or takfin. Now, there are other things called tahnit. Ministry Sayyid will talk about that, which is putting the camphor on the seventh part of the body, right? On the forehead, in the arms, just wipe a little bit, in the hands, and then on the knees, and then on the big toes. This is before the kafan. Before the kafan. Now, the kafan also is three parts. The wajib part is three parts. Part number one is called mi'zar. Mi'zar is a piece of cloth, right, which is called kafan, and in many cases you see it's already divided for the male, for the female. So for the first part, you have to wrap the first piece on the waist of the marhum. Okay, from waist until it covers the knees, right? From the waist, you wrap it like the way mostly people wrap the towel, or the way we wrap, what do you call ihram when we go to Hajj or Umrah. So you wrap it from the waist, and it should go all the way, cover the knees. That is the first part. But this is the wajib part. But the mustahab, if it can go even from the chest all the way to cover the knees, is mustahab. To give it more cloth, more covering the body. That is number one. And number two is called qamis. Qamis is, you sew it, it's something like, you don't sew it. It's the piece that you put on the marhum from the head, and it covers the shoulder, and it comes all the way to the thigh. Okay, it comes all the way to the thigh, and that is called qamis, right? And then the third part, which is the biggest cloth, which should be enough to wrap the entire body. Okay, and not only entire the body, can even cover the head and the feet all together. Meaning the entire body can be wrapped up into that piece of cloth. Okay, it's a big wide that you put the deceased in the middle, and then you can take the one part and overlap this side, and this one overlap the other side. Right? That is how you cover the body with that third piece of cloth. Now, there are other mustahabbat also in the kafan that is recommended. For example, if it's a woman, you make a hijab, a small, like a hijab for the head to be covered. If it's a man, it's mustahab to do something like a mama or just to cover the head, like a hat or something like that in that sense. Then after that, when you finish, it is mustahab to wrap, and by the feet, put like a knot, right? Wrap it there, and then by the head, and then the middle as well. But these all should be untied when the body is put in the grave. Now, this is one of the wajibat. Now, quickly, let me say that there are some few mustahabbat that is not a bad idea to know. One is the body or the person who is giving ghusl, right, should be also in the, the person that's doing the ghusl should be in the state of tahara, which means he shouldn't have something like he has a ghusl on him. No, he should be free from the ghusl. Doesn't have any wajib ghusl on him. That is number one. And number two is mustahab to give the body also wudu. Okay, it's mustahab, it's not wajib. It's mustahab that you can do wudu with the marhum, the deceased is good. Now, the third thing is mustahab continuously giving dua as we doing ghusl. And the best dua you can stop by doing for a second and then read Surah Al-Fatiha and then continue. Oh, Allahumma arham, oh Allah, be pleased with, and you mention the marhum as you do it. Allahumma agfirhu warhamhu warhamna ba'da as you do it. That is also mustahab. And also, it's also mustahab to make sure that the ghusl is done under or in a place that is covered. Shouldn't be done ghusl in the open place unless it becomes necessary. There is no any way out. That's one thing. But it should be a place that is covered so that the dignity of marhum is covered in that situation, inshallah. This is just a brief about ghusl and kafan. I would like to stop here and have Sayyid to take it over from here, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. Jazakumullah, Sheikh Abdul Jalil, for the brief and very precise description of the process of ghusl and the process of kafan. We will have an opportunity for questions. For those of you who have never actually done this or observed it, I can imagine that it might seem kind of confusing, but it is simpler than you might think. So we will have, inshallah, a little bit of a practical demonstration in just a few moments, so that what Sheikh Abdul Jalil described can become a little bit more visible for you. And then we will have an opportunity for your questions. But there are a few points that I would like to clarify before we move to the practical demonstration and then we move on to questions. The first is that in normal circumstances, we do a ghusl, which is a washing of the body as Sheikh described. There are certain cases where perhaps because of the body starting to decompose or because of the body having been injured, maybe burned in a way where water is going to damage the body or it will cause the body to disintegrate. So if it's not possible to wash the body, then instead of ghusl, tayammum is given. And the way that you will do tayammum is that the person who is performing the tayammum, meaning the living person, will use their hands to do tayammum on the forehead and the right hand and then the left hand of the mayyit. And as a precaution, if it is possible, you can also do that tayammum with the hands of the mayyit, him or herself. So the first thing is that you should remove any ring or anything that you would be wearing or any other obstacle. Strike your hands on the earth or the dust, and then you can shake your hands. You will wipe on the deceased from the hairline, or if the person has a receding hairline or is bald, from where the hairline normally would begin, the place where the forehead begins, and you will wipe with the palm of your hand down the entire forehead up until the top of the eyebrows. And then you will wipe the right hand of the deceased with the palm of your hand all the way until the tip of the finger. And then you will wipe the left hand of the deceased all the way till the tip of the finger. So when washing the dead body is not possible, then you will perform tayammum of the dead body. And that will become relevant for us when we talk about the special circumstances in light of the COVID-19 coronavirus. The tayammum is done once. So if you are not able to do the 3 washings with the lote leaves, camphor, and pure water, as Sheikh described, and if you have to do tayammum instead of that, then you will do a single tayammum and then proceed to the shrouding. While you are shrouding the body, or before you shroud the body, you will do what is known as tahnit, which is to put hunut, or camphor powder, on 7 parts of the body of the deceased. So camphor powder is like a powder that has a very strong, pungent odor. And in times past, it was used as a perfume, but also to cover up the odor of the dead body as well. You will take some of that camphor powder, and it is obligatory to put it on the forehead of the deceased, the palm of the right hand, the palm of the left hand, the 2 knees, and the tip of the 2 big toes. So those are 7 parts of the body: the forehead, the 2 palms, 2 knees, 2 toes. And it's also recommended to place some of that camphor on the tip of the nose, just like it is recommended to put the nose on the ground in prostration of prayer. So that is the hunut. And if you have already laid out the shrouds, then you can close the shrouds. Or if you do the hunut first, then you can shroud the dead body. After that, there will be the Salatul Mayyit, which is performed. And we won't talk about the Salatul Mayyit in detail. I think most members of our community have participated, but just a few notes. Salatul Mayyit is also an obligation. According to the school of Ahlul Bayt, Salatul Mayyit must be done by those who are present. So there is no salatul ghaib, or people who are in a different city, for example, or are not present at the janaza, at the funeral. They cannot perform salatul mayyit. They can do dua and they can pray for the mayyit. They can do a recommended 2 rak'ah prayer and dedicate the thawab to a mayyit, and those are all good deeds. But the specific salatul janaza is done by those who are present. Given the fact that it has been recommended by health officials for a large number of people not to congregate, it is strongly advised for a minimum number of people to be participating in the salatul janaza, and those members of the family who may have been in close contact with the deceased, if the deceased is suspected or known to have the coronavirus, they should not participate so they don't risk infecting other people. And people who are elderly or immunocompromised or sick, they should also not participate in the salatul janaza for the same reason, to avoid damage to their own health or the health of others. Instead, they can do dua and they can pray for the deceased, and Allah will allow the reward for that to reach the deceased. So Allah does not want us to try to honor a dead loved one or family member by putting our health or others in jeopardy. We honor the deceased by honoring the command of Allah and preserving our well-being and the well-being of others. So if there are people who are going to participate in the salatul janaza, the namaz-e-mayyit, then that should be maybe 5 or 6 people. In some cases, health officials have said that a gathering of more than 10 people is not recommended, so that is to be maintained. You can maintain a larger than normal distance between the people who are praying and between the person who is leading the prayer and the participants in the prayer, as long as it is not such a large distance that the form of the prayer is lost. So for example, if you have a yard or a meter between people and you are not standing close to one another, then that will be preferred. A small number of people, the prayer of the deceased, as many of you know, it consists of 5 takbirs, and then there are 4 short du'as that are recited in between the takbir. One of those du'as, usually the last one, is a du'a for forgiveness and for mercy for the deceased mu'min or mu'minah. In this circumstance where we have to be aware of distancing from one another, physical distance from one another, it is advisable to perform the funeral prayer, the salatul mayyit, the namaz-e-mayyit, in the cemetery just before burial as well. So that way there is less mingling and handling of the body, and it is perhaps safer for all involved. So that prayer can be performed in the cemetery just before burial. So salatul mayyit, and then after that there will be the burial. The burial will be performed as normal, preserving the hygiene and the health of all involved. So once again, there should be a minimum number of people. Normally, one person enters into the grave and holds on to the shoulders of the deceased when the talqeen, or the recitation of the articles of faith, is done. But that is not a requirement, so the body can be lowered into the grave. Nobody needs to enter into the grave, especially if there is a risk of the coronavirus. The talqeen the recitation of the article of faith can be performed by the side of the grave, and the believers can stand at a distance. So that is not an obligation, and it is not an obligation for anybody to enter into the grave and hold the shoulders of the deceased. Sometimes people wish that the deceased person can have the normal procedure, but remember, all of these alternatives that we are talking about, they are the proper instruction of Islam for that circumstance. So don't think that if we are doing tayammum in place of ghusl, or if we are not even able to do tayammum in an extreme case where there might be a virus that is so contagious that even tayammum is risky, then the burial is to be done without ghusl or without tayammum. That is the teaching of Islam, and that is proper. Just like, for example, if I am alive and I am supposed to do ghusl, but ghusl is dangerous for me. So then the proper way for me to prepare myself for salat is to do tayammum. And if I say, well, no, I want to feel pure and I want to do ghusl, that is not correct. Because in that circumstance, Allah has commanded me to do tayammum. He has not commanded me to do ghusl. So if you ever have a family member who says that, can we do the ghusl? Can we do the tayammum? Can we do the normal procedure for the funeral prayer or for the burial when it is not advisable for health reasons? Then remember, when you follow the alternative teaching that Islam has given us for emergencies and for safety, that is the proper way that is fulfilling the command and the obligation given by Allah. Nothing is deficient and nothing is missing. If a small number of people are present, because that is what is needed for health, that is the proper way. And Allah, in His mercy, is all-encompassing. We shouldn't feel that there has been something missing from the funeral of our loved ones. So that concludes the basic description of the process of burial. Let me just say a few words. Sheikh Abdul Jalil referenced the importance of ihtidar when the believer is on the deathbed. So when a person is on their deathbed, in their final moments, it is recommended for that person, if they are able, to turn their direction so that their feet are facing Qibla, and if they are lying on their back, if they were to sit up, they would face the Qibla. And generally, when somebody is in their final moments, they are not able to move themselves. They may be weak, they may be sick. And so if it is safe for somebody else to do that, with the permission of the guardian of the person who is on the deathbed, then it is an obligatory precaution, an ihtiyat, to turn that person so that they are facing Qibla in the way described. And if it's painful or difficult for a person in those moments, then it is recommended to take that person to whichever part of the house they used to perform prayer in, if they are at home. And if they are at home or in the hospital and you can be present with them and do talqeen, remind them of the testimony of one God, prophecy of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa the names of the imams and the basic articles of faith, then that is recommended at that time, and it can provide some consolation for the deceased. When a person dies then it is recommended as soon as possible before the body comes cold, close their eyes, close their mouth, and if you can tie their mouth closed so it doesn't open, it is more dignified if the mouth is closed. So if you can tie it, that will preserve that state and the mouth will stay closed. Straighten the hands by the side of the mayyit and straighten the legs so that the body of the mayyit is straight. And then it is recommended to cover the deceased Muslim with a cloth, to light a lamp so it is not dark in their presence, and to recite Quran until the preparations can be made for the ghusl. So that is just a reminder about the rules of the deathbed, ihtidar it's called. So let's now look at some of the practical rules of the washing and the shrouding. I want to demonstrate it in a general sense, and inshallah we have a brave volunteer, Brother Amir Abbas will demonstrate for us just the general procedure that was described earlier for washing and shrouding. Those are the main parts that we need volunteers for, and that often it helps to have 3 or 4 people present to help with the lifting of the body and the positioning of the body. So if you give us just a few moments, we will set this so we can have a visual demonstration of how to wash and shroud a body in preparation for prayer and for burial. Just bear with us for a few moments while we are setting up, and then inshallah we will be with you once again. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So we listened to the description by Sheikh Abdul Jalil. Now I am going to not have water, but we are going to describe the procedure verbally and give you a little bit of a visual idea. So when the dead body is being prepared for washing, you will, of course, make sure that you are always being very gentle with the dead body. We have many ahadith that say the respect and the honor that is due to a Muslim is the same when they are dead as when they are alive. So the body should be handled delicately. That is why it helps to have extra volunteers, so somebody can hold the head as people are lifting and turning the body. Make sure that the head, for example, does not fall to the ground, or the body is not being handled in an abrupt manner. The private parts will always be covered, so you will put a towel or a cloth to cover the private parts. And when washing, we want to make sure that the water gets everywhere, but of course, we are not going to touch those parts of the body that are private. So the water will be made to flow. Many places they have a hose, and that is very easy to use to wash the body. And if there is not a hose, then you may have to use a jug or a container of water that you can take, and you can pour the water on the body. Now, you should have gloves on your hand, and if there is a need, you may have to use other protective equipment. We will talk a little bit about the case of the coronavirus after the practical demonstration. But even in normal cases, you will have gloves, you will have an apron, and you will wash the body. Let's say that we do not have a hose, so we have a container of water. It will begin by washing with the ma'us sidr, the lot leaves, then the camphor, and then the pure water. That will be a container that we dip in. Yeah, so I will come on that side for it to be visible, and the recommendation is, as Sheikh said, that you can stand on the right side. Make sure that you do not straddle the deceased. At all times, handle the deceased with respect. The first part would be to pour the water on the head and the neck. So you wash the head and neck, all parts of the head, and gently you can lift the head. I'm not going to touch, but that's what you would do first. After the head and neck, you would pour the water on the right side of the body, like so. Make sure that the water gets everywhere, and you might need to use your hand or a washcloth in order to help the water get to those places where it cannot come by itself. And the water will be poured all the way to the feet. Then you will have, ideally, if you have enough volunteers, one person hold the head so it doesn't move, and two people lift the right side so you can complete washing the back and the right side from underneath. So if we imagine we have two people holding, then we can wash underneath and make sure the water gets everywhere. Of course, if you have a hose, then it will be much easier. And then you will do the same thing with the left side of the body. You can pour the water on top first from the shoulders and wash the lower part of the neck again, all the way to the tip of the toes. And then one person ideally can hold the head. Two people can lift the left side of the body in order to help you pour the water and get the water everywhere. So the first washing will be with lot leaves. The second washing, the entire procedure will be with camphor water. The third washing will be with pure water. And before you do the ghusl, it is helpful to do a thorough washing with soap, shampoo. Make sure that there is no najasat, there are no tubes, there is no tape, or any other obstacle on the body. That way you can do the ghusl much easier. However, if you do find that there is some blood or some najasa that comes out before the ghusl, during the ghusl, or after the ghusl, just clean that najasa, wash that najasa away, and then if it's in the beginning or the middle of the ghusl, you can continue. So that will be the process for the washing in normal circumstances. Now, I think we can stand up. Thank you. Let me just briefly show how the kafan will look. So, once again, as Sheikh described, the first part of the shroud will be the what is known as the izar, or some people refer to it as the chadar. That will be the cloth that covers the entirety of the body, and as a precaution, it should be big enough that it extends above the head and beneath the feet so that it can be tied and it will overlap when we put the body on that cloth. Then there is what is known as the qamis. That is the shirt. So if you can lay down, the head will go in here. Notice that I am putting these cloths in reverse order. And finally, just one second, there will be what is known as the mi'zar. Some people, they know this as the lungi. This is the loincloth. So if you can just once again lay down. Now, this would be on a separate dry table, and once the cloth has been laid out, then the body would be carefully and once again gently brought and placed for the kafan. Once we have done the kafan, or we have laid it out, this would be a good time to do the hunud. So I would take a little bit of crushed camphor, place it on the forehead, on the palms, if you can lift the palms of your hand, on the palms of each hand. Of course, that would require one person to help lift the hands, depending on the condition of the body. Gently, you can put the camphor. Then on the knees and on the tip of the two big toes. And it's recommended to put some camphor on the tip of the nose as well. So if you can lift your hands. So this would be the mi'zar, the loincloth. It should be from the navel to the knee, but it's good for it to come to the feet. This one, as you can see, can come to the feet. And ideally, it should be thick enough that once you have folded it over, it covers the private parts and the body is covered. Sometimes, although it's not required, it is good to put an extra cotton piece of cloth or maybe some paper towels, or if you have like an adult diaper, you can put that also, so that in case there is any najasa that comes out, it does not make the kafan, the shroud, najis. Because if the kafan, the shroud, becomes najis at any point, even at the time of burial, then it needs to either be washed or cut, the najasa needs to be cut away, or the shroud needs to be replaced. So that will be the first. Then we have the qamis, which is the shirt. And I'm just going to, can we get the head in it? You have to scoot down a little bit. Just a little bit. Okay, good. And so, there you go. So this is the qamis. You can see that it's once again recommended for it to be white cotton cloth. In many cases, if there is dua al-jawshan al-kabir or dua al-jawshan al-saghir written on it, that has been recommended by fuqaha. So the shirt, and you can tuck that in. And then, above everything is the third and final cloth, which would be the what's known as the izar. Now, this would be a little bit lower so that it covers the feet, and we would completely cover the mayyit. For a woman, it is recommended but not required to also have a maqna'a, and for men, it is recommended but not required to have a small turban that you can tie just under the head, around the forehead, and then over the neck. Once the shroud has been completed, then you can tie gently over the middle, at the feet, and at the top of the kafan as well, and that will prevent the kafan from opening. And then those ties, aside from the bottom and the top of the kafan, they will be opened at the time of burial. So this is the basic process for shrouding and preparing the body for burial. Now, there are also recommended acts. When we do hunut, it is recommended to also put a little bit of the dust of Karbala. You can even mix it with the camphor, or you can put it separately with the mayyit. And it is recommended to put a fresh branch, just a small, fresh green branch, on the body of the mayyit on the right side, and then over the qamis on the left side by the collarbone. That is a recommended act, but it is not required. So those are the basics. As you can see, it is not as complicated as it looks. It does take a little bit of experience to feel confident. But let us move now to questions and then to any of the specific requirements due to the current health concerns. So we will just take a moment to be ready for the questions. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Jazakumullah. All right, so I think... asking the question. Sure, why don't we have this microphone for Brother Qasim?
So this question is from AK1. Someone has ghusl janaba, ghusl mayyit will suffice. And the second part of this question is, can you do irtimazi ghusl?
So the first question was, if somebody dies and they are in a state of janaba, or if they die and they are in a state of haid, for a lady, or nifas, they do not need to do any you do not need to give them any ghusl other than the ghusl mayyit. So the washing with the rose water, ma'u sidr, the camphor water, ma'u kafur, and the pure water of ma'u tarab, that is all that is needed. Nothing is needed to substitute for ghusl janaba, or for haid, or for nifas. And the washing of the dead body should be done in the tartibi ghusl, the sequential ghusl that we described and that Shaykh Abdul Jalil described, but not in the ghusl by submersion, which is known as al-ghusl al-timasi.
This next question is, I think you already answered this. The question was, so you have to wash the entire body before starting ghusl, and I think you answered by saying you can wash it with shampoo or soap before starting ghusl.
Yes, it is a good idea. It is a good practice to wash the entire body ahead of time, because maybe we can use the same mic, and that might give less interference. So, yes, those three ghusls that we described with so when we, again, just to repeat, when we say that water with lote leaf, what we mean is that you take the powder of the lote leaf, and let's say that you have a bucket of water, you put in enough that people would say there is a mixture of lote leaf in it, but not so much that people would not call it water. Right? If I put in maybe like a pound of lote leaves, then it's no longer pure water. It has to be pure water, but it shouldn't just be one or two little specks, because then people would not say that it has been mixed with lote leaves. So it still should be pure water. That's the first washing. Second washing is the same amount of camphor. Third washing is with pure water. Now, as a convenience, it is a good idea to first wash the entire body, use soap, and even inspect the body, again, keeping the dignity of the private parts covered. But that way, it's easier for you when you have to do the ghusl. Especially if somebody was in the hospital, there may be a tube, or there may be tape somewhere on the body, or perhaps, something that is an obstacle, something sticky. There may be stitches or an injury, and when you inspect the body, you can be aware of that. Okay, next question.
Is from Sayyid Abedin asking, can you do more than one tayammum?
So the tayammum becomes required in case you do not have, for example, let's say you don't have lote leaves, or you don't have camphor. So what do? In that case, let's say you don't have the lote leaves. You will wash it in place of the lote leaves with pure water. And the intention is this is a substitute for the first washing, which should be with the lote leaves. Then you will wash it with camphor water. If you don't have camphor water either, then you will wash it with pure water a second time and say this is in place of the lote leaves. Then you will wash it with pure water a third time. And there you will do tayammum once because of whatever you missed, the one or the two washings that you didn't have the proper materials. That's one case where you'll do tayammum, and you'll do one tayammum as a precaution. The other case you'll do tayammum is if the body is not in a condition, let's say, God forbid, it was a drowning victim, or a burn victim, or the body is decomposed, or if the body is infected with, for example, a very contagious virus like the coronavirus, you don't have protective gear, it's not safe to wash the body, then you will do tayammum. And you will only do one tayammum, you don't do more than one tayammum. Next question.
I'm skipping one question to go over the next two, and I'm going to go over them together. One question from an anonymous person is, can we do tayammum over the plastic bag in case of corona? And then the second question from Muhammad Sabit, can tayammum of deceased infected with coronavirus be performed with gloves on, or must it be with bare hands?
So now we come to the question of the current situation if the deceased is either known or suspected of having coronavirus. Sometimes people complain that our fuqaha and our jurists, they have, different fatwas. Why can't they all have the same fatwa? Well, that's not just our religious experts. In any field, there is always going to be different opinions. The standard of Islam is clear. Where there is a danger to you or others of death or illness or the spread of the contagion, then you do not do that normal part of this burial process, even if it is normally wajib and obligatory. However, does that apply to, for example, doing the ghusl? Well, here you'll get different opinions. In the US, in different countries, many experts have said that the dead body is not a risk for the spread of the coronavirus, and with protective gear and precautions, it is safe to wash the body. Others have said that you should err on the side of caution. The standard from Islam is clear. If there is a realistic, if a reasonable person would say that there is a fear of spread of contagion, of becoming ill, of making other people ill, then you are not to do the ghusl. You are not to do the tayammum with your own hands. You are not to do the hunut with your own hands. Safety of yourself and others comes first. The standard is clear. The question is the application of that standard. And of course, this is still a relatively new illness, so if new information comes, new recommendation comes, then you would follow that. But to make it simple, number one, follow the guidelines of health officials. So if they give you the body in a plastic bag and they say, don't open the plastic bag, don't open the plastic bag. Keep it sealed. According to some fuqaha, you can do tayammum on top of that plastic bag. According to other fuqaha, that is a case where you cannot do the tayammum and you cannot do the ghusl, so you have no obligation. So as a precaution, you can do the tayammum on top of the plastic bag. It doesn't do any harm. And if you can open the plastic bag, or if you are able to have the body and then you can put the kafan, then if it is needed for your safety, you can wear gloves and do tayammum with the gloves on. That is allowed in this circumstance. Normally you would not use gloves if there were no risk. Pardon me. And you can put the shroud, the kafan, pardon me, on top of the plastic bag if the body is sealed in a plastic bag for health reasons. So, next question.
Well, I have more questions here on Zoom. I'm going to slightly switch gears because I think we're short on time also.
Let's go to the form.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the form. The first question that I'm seeing here is from Masood Hasnan. The question is, if I'm the only Muslim at a death of a Sunni brother, all others are non-Muslims, am I allowed to perform ghusl for Sunni? Is the Sunni ghusl method very different from the Shia method?
No, generally speaking, the method is very similar. The differences are more in recommendations. Yes, it is permissible to perform the ghusl for a Sunni. A Muslim should perform the ghusl of a Muslim, except in certain exceptional cases. So if you are the only Muslim, you can have a non-Muslim there to help, maybe to give you water or to help, but you should make the intention because it is an act of worship, and you should perform the ghusl. Before we move on to the other questions, because it is, we are short on time, I do want to reiterate once again, this is a very blessed act. I mean, imagine if somebody is going to meet a very powerful and a very influential person. You might want to meet that person and say, remember, to put a good word in for me. The dead body that you are washing is going to meet Allah, is going to meet the Prophet of Allah, is going to meet Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salatu wassalam. If you volunteered to help with the washing, the shrouding, participated in the funeral, then you are the last person to show a kindness, and that deceased person will repay that kindness. Ahlul Bayt, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will repay that kindness. It is a kindness and an act of charity for the grieving family at their most vulnerable time. So it's very important for us to give importance and to step up. We do have a form where you can put your name if you are interested in getting more information and volunteering, and then we can put you in touch with different communities and centers in your geographical area, so that if they are short of volunteers or if they could use additional volunteers, especially in the future if the need increases, then they can benefit from your participation. So please do sign up. If you are part of a community already, then contact your masjid, say that you would like to volunteer, and it will be an act of kindness and an act of great reward. So let us take whatever questions we have remaining in the few moments, and inshallah then we will end before it is time for Maghrib. at least here on the East Coast.
One of the questions in the forums is from Ajwad Lakwi. What if a person has passed away in a non-Islamic country and was not given ghusl before burial? What happens to the deceased in the after?
So there are rules about that. If time has passed and it would be either insulting to the deceased person or it would bring dishonor to them, for example, if the body might have decomposed or have a stench, then the body is not to be disinterred and given the ghusl. So if that is the case, then there is no obligation to disinter the body. Is disinter the right term? To remove the body and perform the ghusl. But it is an obligation, if it is possible, to perform the proper ghusl, the proper kafan, shrouding, and the proper salat for the funeral prayer for any Muslim who dies. That is a collective obligation, not just for family and friends, but for every Muslim.
I'm jumping back to the questions from the chat from Zoom. AK Waz is asking, when can you do ghusl jabira? And then it's basically two questions. The second part is, can you wash the body with bleach?
So we're not going to talk about ghusl al-jabira because that is for a person who is alive. Maybe we'll have an opportunity for another session. But for the dead body, if it is not possible to do the ghusl, then you will do tayammum as I described earlier. So wudu al-jabira, ghusl al-jabira applies to a living person, and there are the rules specific for that. And the washing with bleach. So you can use shampoo, you can use soap, you can use cleansing agents to remove najasa or to remove any, say, paint or obstacle that might be on the body that would prevent water from reaching the skin for ghusl. But you have to do so in a way that's not going to damage the skin, not going to damage the body, and that preserves the dignity of the body. So beware that the cleaning agents you should use are the same cleaning agents that you would use with a living body. The body is to be treated with the respect and dignity that a living Muslim would be treated, and not to use harsh chemicals that would not be safe for a living body or that might damage the skin, for example.
Again, this is a question that you probably did answer, but I'm going to go over it just to reinforce. The question is, do you have to remove all tubes that are inserted in the hospital, feeding tube, breathing tube, IV lines, etc.?
Do you have to remove all tubes? So one thing is that we want to make sure that the body is not going to be najis even after it's been shrouded. So it might help to stuff the nostrils, the ear, the orifices of the body with some cotton or some cloth. And then if there is a tube, ideally before you receive the body, if the medical staff can remove those tubes, that would be the best case, or cut them very close to the body so there is no obstacle. If there is a little bit of a tube or something like that, and you are able to wash the body and the water can reach all of the external parts of the skin, then there is no problem in that. So the two concerns we have are water should reach everywhere, and that there should be no najasa that comes out, no impurity that comes out of the body. So if you can also let us know how many questions we have, and if anybody has submitted a question and has not received an answer, in the YouTube description there should be a form. So you can resubmit your question with your email, and we will respond to your question if we don't have time to do so right now. And once again, please do give your name, contact information, so that we can connect you with communities that can benefit from your volunteering for this great community service. We have time for a few more questions, inshallah. How many more questions do we have?
We have, I was skipping a few, but if you want me to go over some, I can. Let's take this last one. If someone due to love doesn't take precautions, so I guess the gist of the question is if somebody, especially in the current scenario, if you're giving ghusl to somebody who's infectious and you don't take the right precaution because of love or whatever, and you get infected, is that haram even though you've given the ghusl right in the right manner?
Yes, it is haram, and you are also liable to anybody that you may have infected out of negligence. So again, if you're dealing with a loved one and they are emotional, they may not be accepting, then this is something that you have to deal with delicately. But when there is an Islamic obligation, especially when it comes to health and life of other people, we have to take it seriously. We should not be rude, we should not be self-righteous, especially when people are emotional and are grieving, but because it is a higher concern. Just like if you have a friend who is going to harm themselves or harm somebody else, somebody who is driving when they are in an extreme state of grief and not able to drive safely, then you will be nice, but you will prevent them from doing something that might bring harm to them or others. Same thing applies here. If the obligation is to do tayammum, then you have to do tayammum. Tayammum is what is valid, not anything else. And so on. Is that all?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about whether this question should be brought up, but I'm going to leave that up to you. And you can choose to answer or not. And it's a two-pronged question. The first part is can the kafan be of plastic? I guess the question really is, can it be of any other material other than cloth? And then this question that I was really thinking whether I should present to you, Aga, is that can you burn the body under any circumstances?
No, cremation is not allowed in Islam. There are some Muslims who may be ignorant of the law or for various reasons, even if they make a will to be cremated, it is not permissible to carry out that will because the honor of the body comes first. So remember, our body is not our property. Our body is the property of Allah. He has given me authority. I can make a will. I can say that, I want somebody to be taking charge of my burial. I want somebody to be taking charge of my funeral preparations. I do have authority that Allah has given me, but it's limited authority. I can't do whatever I want with my body because it's not my property, it's God's property when I'm alive and when I die. So cremation is not allowed. The body should be buried. If there is a need, again, to seal the body, to take whatever precautions to prevent the spread of contagion, then those must be taken, but the body must be buried as close to the proper normal way as possible. And the shroud should be something that is cloth, or that can be called clothing, thob in Arabic. So the best thing is white cotton. It can be other materials like linen, or a blend. So for example, a cotton or a wool silk blend, as long as it's not majority silk. And if there is no thobe, no clothing available, then other materials can be used to cover the body. There is a priority list that is mentioned. So for example, halal leather can be used, or silk can be used if nothing else is available. But when cloth is available, then cloth should be used. It doesn't have to be white. And if you have a plastic covering, then you can put the pieces of the shroud, as I described, on top of that plastic. I believe we are out of time. Thank you all for attending. Remember that this is something that we all need. Our families will be in need, so we should know these laws. And if we are able, we should volunteer, each and every one of us, not just because it is a need, not just because there is a potential emergency in the coming weeks or months, but because this is an act of service, an act of worship, and a reminder for ourselves that we are going to die. May Allah protect all of us and all members of our community, and may Allah grant us the tawfiq to come to the assistance and be of service to our fellow community members when they are in greatest need. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.